Good morning. It's 10:01. I'm going to open commerce and go into a 2-minute recess. Thank you. All right, I'm going to pull us out of recess, and I would entertain a motion to go into executive session, please. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great. So I think everyone has the list of commerce bills to exec, and we'll be in executive session for about an hour. Then we have a hearing on 170. If we don't finish execing bills, we'll return and finish up what we need to do. I'm going to go in numeric order. We'll start with Senate Bill 26. And on this one, we have an amendment that came from the Builders Association. And I think before we move forward, I'd like to ask Mr. Mayberry if you could come up and maybe speak to this amendment for a moment. And thank you for joining us this morning. I appreciate it.
It is my pleasure. And good morning. Great day to be in New Hampshire.
Yeah, every day is a great day to be in New Hampshire.
Yes, it is. My name is Matt Mayberry. I'm the CEO of the New Hampshire Home Builders Association. Last time I came before you with this, this is about escrows for change orders.
Mm-hmm.
And we worked with the Attorney General's office to come up with some language that we had agreed upon. It came through. We sent it to OLS. They changed a couple words within it.
Mm-hmm.
So the intent is still the same. And that was a arm's length third party would hold those upgrade charges.
Mm-hmm.
When they're done, the developer goes and says, I've ordered it, can I get paid for them? And then the order has been completed, can I please get paid for that? We ask you to please accept the amendment as submitted by OLS, but it may come back again with a word or two change from the Attorney General's office because we couldn't get them to agree fast enough.
I see.
The intent is still the same.
Okay. All right. Questions? Yes.
Question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Matt, I like this amendment. I think it's really practical. And my question is, does it take engaging the Attorney General's office for the parties to make this deal on their own, that while a project is ongoing, that some of the deposit could be used to reimburse change orders?
When the development goes into approval with the Attorney General's office, there'll be a little line in there like, we will accept upgrades of, kitchen cabinets, countertops, carpeting, and flooring, and things like that. That'll be addressed when they file for that subdivision.
Great, thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Other comments, questions? All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayberry. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very, very much. All right. Do we have a motion on the underlying bill on Senate Bill 26? We have a motion about to pass. I'll second that. And the amendment? All right. We have a motion to approve, and I will second that. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment to Senate Bill 26, the number of which eludes me, Aaron, which 0835S. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. All in favor of Senate Bill 26 as amended, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Do we have a motion for consent? All right. And again, I'll second. All in favor of consent, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Anyone really amped to take this out? Senator Reardon, you got it. All right, thank you. Senate Bill 55. This is a bill providing temporary exemptions from the land use change tax. So essentially suspends the land use change tax if you're going to construct a 20-unit or larger project. And there was a lot of discussion on this one, and I'd love to hear what folks think.
Do you need a motion first?
Love a motion if you've got one. Your microphone, though.
Oh, sorry. Although well-intended, I have to request that we, an expedient to legislate. And do I need a second to speak to the
I'll
bill?
second it.
We have a second. All right.
Okay, so while I support, many of our housing bills, I can't endorse this particular bill. It's not an option, it's a mandate. It takes a one-size-fits-all approach, ignoring the unique needs of our communities. Housing policies must be considered as a package, not in isolation. Parking, ADUs, water and sewer, all part of a larger discussion. And thanks to enabling legislation and programs like Invest New Hampshire and the Housing Champions Initiative, thousands of housing units will come online in the years ahead. Communities are already stepping up. I feel that there are some technical difficulties with the bill. It is in violation of RSA 674. Semicolon 17. It's in conflict with existing law, which would need to be fixed, which outlines the purposes of zoning ordinances, including congestion, promoting health and safety, and preventing overcrowding. It also undermines the master plan process, a cornerstone of local land use planning. When you have mandates like this, it falls on the backs of the taxpayers. The cost falls on them. I don't really see how this is going to help in our housing very much, how many people could even use it. And we've had a lot of objection to it. It doesn't even say anything for affordable or workforce. All it says is housing, 20 houses. So in listening to my constituents throughout my district, I recommend an expedient to legislate.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of inexpedient to legislate, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, hearing none. We have a motion on consent. Do we have a second? Senator Reardon, seconds. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Who wants to take this one out?
I will.
Senator Ricciardi. Keep it short.
sorry.
It probably won't come up because we're on consent.
Okay.
All right, Senate Bill 85. This is one that provides a change to lending limits for banks, and it basically brings it in line with federal requirements. There is an amendment to this, and let me pull this up real quick. There's an amendment to this one. Yeah, I think that's right. Try not to bang my mic so Aaron doesn't lose his hearing. Senate Bill 85. Yeah, so this, I think, is a pretty solid bill. We have an amendment that clarifies a couple of things that came to us from Senator Pearl. That's Amendment 0413. I will go ahead and make a motion on this one of ought to pass on Senate Bill 85.
Second.
It was second from Senator Murphy. And I will also move the amendment 0413S as ought to pass. Second from Senator Reardon. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor of the amendment, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All in favor of Senate Bill 85, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right,
Move consent.
I'll second consent. All in favor of consent?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great. And Aaron, I'll take this one out. Next up is Senate Bill 90. Senator Murphy, do you want to address this briefly for us?
Mr. Chairman, I would move off to pass on Senate Bill 90.
I'll second.
Thank you. And I would move Amendment 0610S. redefining commercially zoned land as retail uses, offices, medical offices, and technology parks.
All right, and I'll second that as well.
Thank you.
All right. Now, as I recall, this is where we had testimony from town of Newington, basically, saying, well, we aren't really sure we want commercial development. As I remember the discussion, your position was, well, that's kind of exactly what we want. So we can take advantage of old spaces and so on,
Yeah, well,
and bring communities together.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, the issue is that we have vacant commercial space. This bill doesn't force communities to take commercial development. It does tell communities that you must allow people the opportunity to live near where you work.
Yeah.
Newington was a great example because they came in to speak against the bill. But here he said, we've designed our community to have our houses over here and our workplaces and retail structures over here, and you've got to drive from A to B.
Yeah.
So that's not good for really anybody. It's good to provide the option for people, but this just removes the mandate on developers and allows them more freedom on where to build.
Okay. All right. Senator Bishardi, you have some thoughts on this one?
Well, having heard it from even not my district, Derry, all across the board, again, you're taking away local control. And in this case, the land and use boards have been very consistent with allowing multi-use development with no residential units on the first floor. And the local communities in the state cannot inadvertently create a future crisis by replacing all commercially zoned areas with residential units. And I just believe that we should give enabling legislation to the towns, not mandate the towns, which ends up being a significant cost on the backs of the taxpayers. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Senator. Senator Fett?
I thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the work Senator Murphy has done on this bill, and we've heard a lot of input from these bills. My fear is that we are moving very fast and furious with a lot of these deregulation bills, and we have several here today. We've already heard several already, passed a couple. My opinion would be to re-refer this bill so we can kind of take a peek at all of these bills as a whole. So I won't be voting to pass for this bill, not because I don't like it, but because I just think we're moving too fast, and I'd like a little bit more time to look through all these bills, talk with our municipalities, and figure out where the happy medium here is on these. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. I appreciate those comments. Any others? All right. We do have a motion about to pass on the bill and the amendment. Are we ready? Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, I would agree, not to kill the bill, but a re-refer to review.
Okay. All right. If I'm reading the committee, I think we're at 3-3. I could be wrong. Yes, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree that I think this is an important bill for all the reasons that Senator Murphy stated, and the fact that lots of people don't have cars nowadays, and that's sometimes a financial
Right.
choice, sometimes a particular choice. I am not opposed to re-referring this. I think it's important to keep that idea alive, but we could certainly make this a better bill.
Senator Murphy, anything? Or Senator McGee, please.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Senator. I think I heard this recently in another discussion on housing, and so I'm going to paraphrase. The best time to plant a fruit tree is 20 years ago. Second best time to plant a fruit tree is today.
Yeah.
We should pass this bill.
Okay. Thank you. Senator Murphy, anything to add? Or no?
Mr. Chairman, this is not forcing communities to do anything other than allow people the opportunity, allow builders and individuals to create construction, create residential units where there is demand for that. If someone wants to live above a storefront, why would we want communities to be able to tell people, no, you must live 5 miles away and drive there? So many people now do not own vehicles, and allowing builders and allowing individuals to meet that demand and give people the opportunity to live near where they work, I think is a good thing. It builds vibrant communities. This is the way that You know, it's funny, when I was a planner, the truth is planning as a profession did a lot of damage to towns. The strict separation of uses did not work. And over a period of a century, it tore communities apart and it created traffic jams and sprawl. You think about the areas of this state that you drive through and you think, ooh, and we all know it. I mean, I'm not going to offend anybody by pointing them out, but it's the place where you drive for 45 seconds, stop into a traffic, you hit a stoplight, you stop, and then you get to go again. And planning created that mess. And now planners have begun to recognize this was a problem, shouldn't have done this. And they've really been trying to steer communities back towards mixed uses and walking to work and creating that sort of vibrancy and traffic relief that results. And so I would encourage the committee to vote yes on the bill.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? All right, we do have a motion of ought to pass as amended. Let's first take up the amendment. All in favor of the amendment, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. And we have an ought to pass on the underlying bill, Senate Bill 90. All in favor of Senate Bill 90, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
All right, we're at 3-3. I'll take this one out. All right. 163. This prohibits local moratoria and limitations for consumer cooperative associations. This is a bill from Senator. Any discussion on this one or a motion? All right, I will move on to pass on Senate Bill 163. We have a second from Senator Murphy. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. We will not put this one on consent because it might well get pulled. So
Mr. Chair, was that 4-2?
it was 4-2. Yes. Thank you. All right. Senate Bill 165. Yes, sir. I will take this one out. Unless Senator Murphy would like to. Why don't you? Yeah. All right. All right. Sorry about that.
I'm in for a busy calendar.
I just figure it's gonna be a good discussion. All right. We are on 165, right?
Move on to pass.
We have motion about to pass. I will second that. This one changes audit requirement limits, brings them really up to present standards. Pretty solid thing to do, I think. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor of the ought to pass motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I'll move. We have a motion for consent from Senator Frenton. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Senator Ricciardi. All in favor of consent, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Senator Reardon, would you do the honor
Thank
on
you.
this one?
Yes.
All right. 166 has to do with manufactured housing and notice that is given when an area might be sold. So it has to do with resale disclosures and that sort of thing.
Move on to pass.
We have an ought to pass motion from Senator Reardon. Do we have a second? Second. Second from Senator McGue. Any discussion on this one? Seeing none, all in favor of the ought to pass motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, I'll second the consent motion from Senator Reardon. All in favor of consent, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Anyone want to take this out? Senator Reardon, it's yours. Thank you. All right, now, 167. Senator Fenton, you have a replace all amendment.
I do.
Would you like to speak to your amendment?
Yeah, so this amendment deals a lot with a bill we passed last year that the governor signed. It was 118 that essentially helped towns being reimbursed for services with transient individuals. Yes. Oh, sorry. Did anybody catch that?
Just what he's there for.
To paraphrase, this is a follow-up bill, fixing a loophole that was caused by a bill last year dealing with towns reimbursing other towns for transient individuals. And this bill sets a minimum, or the replace all amendment sets a minimum standard for housing assistance that municipalities must include in locally adopted welfare guidelines. So that ensures assistance amounts reflect actual housing costs as determined by local sources, and prevents municipalities from setting unrealistically low aid levels. So this is a request from the towns after we passed that bill that Governor Sununu signed last year, essentially fixing a loophole.
Okay. Is there discussion? All right. I do want to ask a couple questions, maybe just one.
Yeah.
Roman numeral 2, under new section 2. Temporary emergency housing, whoever it is, hotel or motel, the actual cost of available and accessible hotels and motels. What does that mean? Is that the rate that I set?
Yeah, so essentially what was happening, thank you for the chair, Mr. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair, not for the chair question.
Tell me whatever you want.
Right, it's been a long morning. So essentially what was happening is we passed this bill so that towns would start providing resources to their transient individuals.
Yeah.
And what they have done now is discovered a loophole where they can set unrealistically low levels of aid.
Okay.
So they could say, no, that motel is only $30 a night. When in reality, that's not the case. It's $100 a night. So they're getting away with not reimbursing these other municipalities the actual amount.
I see. All right. So what is to keep me as a hotelier from artificially inflating my rates and taking more money? That's my concern with that section.
Well, Mr. Chair, being in the hospitality industry, that's a great question.
That's it.
Now that we don't have it on the back of the door.
That's my only
you're-
real issue with this one. Yeah, we don't have it on the back of the door anymore thanks to this committee.
Well, I don't know if, well, good
you
question.
see what I'm saying?
No, Mr. Chair, I appreciate the question. I don't know if that's the case that local establishments are artificially inflating their prices specifically for something like this.
Right.
I
They're
think
probably not.
Yeah, I
I
think
just
they-
don't want to incent them to do that.
No, and I think there may be rules against them artificially inflating, so they're not allowed to do that. But I defer to the chair who knows this
I
industry very
don't
well.
think there is anything that prohibits that.
If Mr. Chair, if you have language you want to throw into this as a committee amendment, I'm happy to,
Let's think about this. The amount to be included in the locally adopted system for temporary energy housing, the actual cost of it. And see, that language is difficult too, because you're talking about the actual cost, not the actual rate. So as a hotelier, I can say, well, my cost of selling a room on a given night is only $40, right? That's the cost. My rate might be 120. So that's the rate. I don't know. I'm just worried about the language, Senator. I think the intention here is good. I understand what you're trying to do. I'm just worried it isn't quite clear enough there. How can we clear that up? So you could do something, we could say, instead of the actual cost, something like, I mean, we want to get at what the rate would be at that period, at that point in time. For example, there are a couple small places in my district, I bet they're $69 a night in the off season, right? That's a fine rate, for temporary emergency housing. But their cost is much lower than that. It's the fixed costs at hotels and motels that kill you.
actual costs available, not artificially inflated.
We could try to get at, we're essentially trying to get at the normal and customary rate. That's where we're trying to go, right? I think that's your intention.
Yes.
Yeah, and that I can support, provided they're not going to artificially inflate them. And again, that's my only real concern here. We could say, well, housing in a hotel is the,
Set rate,
it could be that.
the actual set rate of cost.
Well, no cost. I think we want to pull cost out.
And
Because you want to tie this to what the hotelier would normally charge. That's,
Actual rate. just where to
we
go.
could say we could say actual rate.
Because Mr. Chair, I think there are laws that you cannot change rate depending on who the customer is.
No, you can't. That's correct.
So we could just change cost to rate.
We could. Actual rate of available and accessible hotels and motels. Is there discussion in my left-hand side on this one? You see what the amendment's trying to do.
I do, Mr. Chairman. I can't support the amendment regardless.
Okay,
I think we just honestly have a disagreement
all right,
of opinion, and
okay,
so I'm ready to vote.
all right, others? Okay, I mean, I really appreciate the intent. Maybe we can find another way to get at this after crossover.
Yeah, happy to shelve this, you know,
Okay.
it's not.
Well, let's not shelve it. Let's take it back and see if we can't clarify that section so we don't set it up for possible abuse. And if we can do that, I think we might have something here.
Well, I did not move the amendment, so we'll just
Okay.
sit.
All right, appreciate it. Okay, so do we have a motion on this bill? We do not. All right, as I recall, there's another bill that's almost identical from Senator Abar. So our position on this one was going to be ITL. So I will make that motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Senator Reardon. All in favor of ITL, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? All right, move consent.
Second.
Second from Senator Reardon. All in favor of consent, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. All right, 169. Yeah, I'll take this out should the need arise. Okay. This one is from Senator Rosenwald, and it has to do with information that's provided to employees receiving workers' comp benefits. Do we have a motion on this one?
Move on to pass.
We have a motion about to pass from Senator Reardon, a second from Senator Fenton. Is there discussion? All right, seeing none. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have a motion for consent.
So moved.
So moved.
We have a motion from Senator
Second.
Reardon, a second from Senator Rishardi. All in favor of consent, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Anyone want to take this one out? Senator Reardon, you're going to be active. Thank you. All right. We're making good time here. This Senate Bill 71, if I recall, is Senator Perkins Cuoco. No, it's Senator Rishardi. Sorry.
That's a,
And this one is relative to required pay for remote work. And Senator Rishardi, if I remember right, this is essentially one that says if you sit down at your computer for 30 minutes, you don't get paid for 2 hours.
correct.
Yeah, okay. Do we have a motion on this one?
I move all to pass.
All right, Senator Rishardi, do you want to second your own
Yes,
bill?
I'll second it.
All right, so we have a second. Is there any further discussion on this one? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, do we have a motion for consent?
So moved.
All right, Senator Fenton, seconded by Senator Rishardi. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Great. Senator Rishardi, would you take this one out?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. All right, 172. This is Senator Prentice. And this has to do with non-competes. Right? For certain types of nurses, it is specific to advanced practice registered nurses.
Move on to pass.
Okay, we have a motion of ought to pass and a second. Discussion on this one. Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It appears this was an oversight when a similar provision was passed for nurses at one point and failed to include this section of the statute that goes with license,
So if I
Advanced.
understand, then we already have this for nurses.
Correct.
Okay. Discussion. Senator McGee?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we probably need to have a look at this a little bit longer, and should we refer this bill? I'll be voting against the ought to pass. For a number of other reasons as well. I don't believe this does exist for nurses, actually.
Okay. For RNs?
For RNs, I don't think there is a specific prohibition on non-competes, especially in a private practice. I could be wrong on that, so I'd be interested if someone wants to correct me on that.
Yeah, I'm looking at the testimony now. Again. Would you like to come forward? Please. And you're the director.
Hi,
Good morning.
I'm Angela Boyle.
Glad you're here.
Thank you.
Could you refresh us on this? Make sure we have it
yeah,
right.
this was a bill that was put forth by the advanced practice nurses in New Hampshire. And it was something their national association recommended. And so there is a clause for nurses, but this was carved out especially for the advanced practice nursing.
So we already have this in statute for nurses.
Yeah, this is
Okay.
just a housekeeping.
Do you know why they were left out?
I don't.
Okay.
I think sometimes with the different carved out professions, sometimes that happens.
Yeah.
And so it was recommended by their national organization.
So the view is it was probably just an oversight.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Other questions? Thank you.
You're
Appreciate
welcome. Thank you.
that. All right. Given that backdrop, man, I think I can vote in favor of this. Senator McGue?
So my concern is if an institution invests significantly in the training
Yeah.
or education for an advanced practice nurse, as they often do, they ought to be entitled to require some level of service to that resource that they've invested in. And my concern is that in today's transient workforce, they are often not providing that return on the investment. And I've seen it, we've all seen it, we've seen shortages, especially in the specialty nurses, where mid-level providers are more often and increasingly often utilized. So I think that patients deserve stability in their treatment team, especially when they've just become accustomed to that mid-level practitioner that they know, love, and trust.
Right.
And then they get a letter or they show up, and I'm speaking from very personal direct experience from constituents that have absolutely shown up for an appointment to find their NP has moved on after just securing a relationship with that NP in a very short period of time. So the example is they got their training, and I'm presuming took advantage of some educational reimbursement, and that I wouldn't know factually, but who wouldn't if it were offered by their institution? It's possible they didn't. Stayed for a short period of time and then moved on to greener pastures and more well-paying pastures 50 minutes to our south in a medical, well-paid medical environment just in Metro Boston. So should an organization and an individual mutually agree for one to invest in the other, I don't think it's unreasonable for that institution to require even a short period of time. And it's between the parties, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I think we ought to examine this a little further, and
see.
I'll support a re-refer motion on this.
So I get that. Might it be possible if we re-refer it? It could come back in the fall. I'm thinking, how could you put something in the bill that says, look, if the company where this person is working, the hospital, doctor's office, whatever it is, this person is working, has participated in the cost of preparing this person, for the profession. After 2 years, non-compete couldn't be done, but the first 2 years, maybe so. Or if you leave before 2 years, you reimburse the cost of your education.
That seems very reasonable. Or if the acquiring entity, right, and that's what's commonly done in
Would pay
there's
off.
a buyout.
Would
Sure.
pay off the other. It's like buying a sports player. Almost.
Absolutely, and that's done elsewhere.
Not to diminish nurses. I didn't mean that.
And it's not just in this level of practice, right? It happens
Yeah,
elsewhere
yeah,
too.
yeah.
And that practice is fair for both sides.
Okay.
And what I'm most concerned about is the patient-provider relationship that gets established, right? It's the continuity of care that happens, and that's what we hear, or what I've heard about from the patients. It's the patients, and it's ultimately the outcomes. You will hear that refrain from me often. That's what I'm looking to protect
And that's fair. So
ultimately.
help me, a novice who just goes in and nurses take my blood pressure and stuff before physical. The difference between advanced practice and, say, a registered nurse, what's that look like?
Oh, so a registered nurse.
Because our RNs have this now, right? So I'm trying to understand, is there a distinct difference here that would suggest it should be different for this group?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you're asking, if the question is what's the difference between a registered nurse, a
Sort of.
BSN?
Yeah.
So you can first become a registered nurse after your associate's degree.
Mm-hmm.
And more often than not now, institutions require a BSN.
Yeah.
In addition, so obviously registered nurse, but
That's
a
Bachelor's of
BSN.
Science in Nursing, right?
Correct, yeah, correct. And then additional training beyond that, master's prepared nurse can be and some go straight through.
So this could be a
Become
significant investment then for an employer. Yeah,
Could be.
more than we would see with an RN.
Significantly more.
Yeah, okay, that does, yes. Senator-
I would analogize the nurse practitioner closer to your physician's assistant.
Yeah,
And-
yeah.
And having their own patients, their own
Right, okay.
doctor cases, yeah.
Yeah, and in our state, they can prescribe and practice independently. And actually, the one difference is an NP or APRN, NP for short, can practice fully independently, hang a shingle, rent an office, practice independently. Where a PA, I find, if I still understand the current regulations, cannot do that fully independently yet. I believe that's correct.
I think your carve-out works. If you owe a debt to your employer.
Right.
For education.
Well, we could do a committee amendment. Does that carve out that I proposed work or not?
It probably does. We might need to have a look at it. I believe in, full disclosure, I believe that some employers probably require as a condition of taking that educational reimbursement, they probably do have some requirement that you stay around. My concern is, and this is why I suggest we refer, that we might want to look into it. If we pass this, we might be preempting that. I don't know. Would we be in conflict about it? In other words, if an employer says, if we pay for your tuition, you agree to stay here. If you leave, you'll repay it.
So
Could they, if we pass this, could they leave, take their signing bonus from the new place, repay it? I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm trying to prevent the transient providers in healthcare impacting the patient-provider relationship and ultimately the clinical outcomes.
because all right, I'm thinking here, what do we do with this? I mean, we could provide the senator an opportunity to bring a floor amendment to the Senate. I'm not sure I want to pass it out, but we could do the re-refer, not put it on consent, let her know the situation, and we could deal with that on the Senate floor. Is that a reasonable thing to do? Senator McHugh, you're okay with the re-refer? If we can find a way to make this work, let's do it.
Sure.
Okay, all right. So do we need to withdraw the ought to pass? How do we do that? Okay, all right, great.
And I'll
So-
move re-refer.
We have a motion to re-refer from Senator McHugh,
I just want to, so
Yes,
just to clarify, Mr. Chair,
and I'll second that.
we are re-referring,
Yes,
we're not going to put it on consent.
correct.
And the hopes is that we're going to let the prime sponsor
Yes.
provide a floor amendment
That's correct.
to address these issues.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr.
And if you folks could maybe work with her on that, that'd be great. Okay? All right. So all in favor of the re-refer motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. I like this outcome. I think this gives us an opportunity to try to get it right and, bring a little
Mr.
parity.
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
can I throw a curveball at you and ask for a 5-minute recess?
Yes, of course. 5-minute recess. We will return at about 11 or 10:45.
Thank you.
I'll take this one out. All right.
We're making great time.
We are.
Yeah.
I'll tell you.
Thank you.
So, so there's an amendment to it. I'm getting copies for it, so.
Okay, we'll take a look at it. Great. It'll be a few minutes before we get there. We're coming back to Senate Bill 9. We're gonna reconsider the vote. How do we do that? We have a motion made and then a second, and we vote on reconsideration?
Pretty sure.
I think that's how it works. Right. Okay. Yeah, well, there isn't a prevailing side, so maybe the chair? The chair's gonna make the motion for reconsideration. All right, I will bring Congress out of recess. I'm sorry, we're about 4 minutes late. I do like to run the train on time, but we're doing all right. We had a discussion about Senate Bill 90, and there's a desire to reconsider that vote. And I'm going to make a motion for reconsideration of Senate Bill 90.
Second.
We have a second from Senator Murphy. All in favor of reconsideration, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. So as a reminder, we had voted on an ought to pass as amended. I will entertain another motion. Yes, Senator Murphy. All
I'll
right.
second.
We have a motion to re-refer with a second. Do we need to deal with the amendment, Aaron?
Yeah.
I didn't think so. Okay, just wanted to be sure. All right. All in favor of the re-refer motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Move consent.
I'll second consent. All in favor of consent, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And as I recall, Aaron, I was taking this one out, so we'll leave it there. Okay. All right, that brings us to 173. Yes. Residential property subject to housing covenants under the low income tax credit. Let me get there. And this was from Senator Murphy. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, Senator, Mr. Chairman, you said 173?
Do I have that wrong?
Oh,
Yes, 173.
then I move re-refer.
Okay, we have a motion to re-refer. Do we
I
have
will
a
second it.
and a second? Is there discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the re-refer motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? All right, I will move consent.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor of consent? Aye. Any opposed? Senator Murphy, will you take this out?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Well, that was interesting. Senate Bill 174. This has to do with the number of bedrooms. I will move ought to pass,
Second.
and we have a second. Is there discussion on this one?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Senator Shardy.
Again, listening to my constituents, the legislation is in direct opposition with the concepts for responsible municipal planning. And the planning boards have to consider the number of bedrooms in a development to ensure that the municipality services, particularly wastewater. That's extremely important, and that they're all adequately sized to accommodate growth. And for those reasons, I cannot support this bill.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Rishardi. Any other discussion? Senator Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, it's similar to what I said before. I like the intent of these bills, and I'm for, you know, fixing our housing crisis. But again, I'm just nervous that we're moving very fast and very furious with a lot of this deregulation. at a local level. And, we have a lot of bills around this. I think it's going to create a lot of litigation, especially at a local level, because there's contradicting themes in this. So I would prefer a re-refer to this, but I cannot be a yes on the pass.
Okay,
May I say something else, Mr.
of
Chairman?
course.
I too, we have to support our housing, but when we go fast like this, really, it's not how good planning works. It's not picking off one bill in one situation. It requires a much more valuable conversation that can be all encompassing of many of these bills. And I'm not suggesting that we ITL it. I'm suggesting we re-refer it, take a closer, more comprehensive look so we can consider things like wastewater and other issues that could compound the situation and not really help it.
Okay. Thank you,
Mr. Chairman.
Chairman. Senator Reardon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree that it's very important to consider wastewater when doing a building of this size, but the number of bedrooms in a particular unit as opposed to the whole development is what's going to dictate what the waste and water capacity is and what the planning board requires. So I think we're still safe on that
Okay.
front.
All right. Thank you, Senator Reardon. Any other discussion? Senator Murphy?
Mr. Chairman, I know that there's a lot of bills coming through this committee, both here and in the House, and I've offered many of them. Yes, there's a lot of solutions coming in, but it's because we legitimately have a housing crisis, and this cannot wait another year or 2 or 3 or 4. This is an issue that must be addressed. Specifically regarding this bill, we heard testimony from the home builders of the games that are played. The planning boards throw up a roadblock and the home builders find their way around it. And this simply attempts to end one of those games. Well, we have this den. It can't be a bedroom, wink, wink, until you put a wardrobe in it. Right? And that's exactly what happens.
Okay.
So this simply attempts to do away with the myth of new construction causing new school spending, which has been completely demolished by a recent study from the realtors. So that's why I'm asking the committee to vote yes.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor of the ought to pass motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No?
And that's a 4-2. All right, thank you. Who would like to take this out? Senator Murphy?
Yes.
Okay. Very good. All right, we're coming up on time for our scheduled hearing, but I think we can probably get through one more bill, and that brings us to Senate Bill 175. I really like this bill. I had an amendment for it, but I'm not sure the appetite is there quite yet as it's been constructed. Is there a motion on 175?
I'm going to re-refer.
We have a motion of re-refer. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Senator Reardon. Is there discussion on this?
73 should pass.
Seeing none, all in favor of re-refer, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, do we have motion for consent?
So moved.
All right.
Second?
All right, we have motion and a second. All in favor of consent, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Senator Murphy, it's yours. So would you take it out?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
All right. I do hope personally we'll revisit this one in the fall and try to make it work. Does a lot of good things. All right, let's check the official time, 10:57. I'm going to put us into a 3-minute recess and we will open at 11 a.m. with Senate Bill 170.
We want it outside, like this?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, we're just, yeah.
I did-
Gotcha. How are you?
Good morning, Mr.
All
Chairman.
right, a couple more minutes. All right. Commerce out of recess and open the hearing on Senate Bill 170, and I welcome the prime sponsor, Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you recall, the prime sponsor of Senate Bill 170 was Senator Perkins Coie, who came in with a bill remarkably similar to Senate Bill 173. And she said at the time of the hearing, please pass 173 instead of 170. And feel free to use 170 for anything else that you might have in mind. And I thought back to several housing roundtables that I have attended recently. There was a big one I attended at St. Anselm's back in January. And builders and realtors came forward with a number of horror stories, places where the state or the towns have acted to block development or make it much harder than it needed to be, and therefore stifle development and cause a housing issue. And we were past the filing deadline the time that I went to this particular roundtable, but I did keep a list of the issues that were brought to my attention, and that list is now turned into the replace all amendment before you. This is Amendment 872S. And I'd like to walk the committee through it step by step, if I may.
Well, I'm sorry, Senator, what's the number on that amendment again?
872.
872. Do you have copies? Because I've got the wrong one, apparently. All right, please continue.
Thank you. Section 1. Section 1 adds a simple sentence: cities, towns, and municipalities shall not mandate that occupants of housing units be related by blood or marriage. Now, this to me would be common sense, that cities and towns should not be discriminating against people based on whether they're related or not. But regardless, that is the case in several other communities. They have this ordinance. It has in the past been used to discriminate against people who were gay, people who were not looked upon with kindness by those around them, and made it more difficult for them to live in those particular communities. And so this seeks to rectify that problem. Section 2, Roman numerals 1 and 2 specify that cities and towns must use the requirements DES has for test pits for septic systems and well siting requirements. They can't adopt more strict requirements than those required by DES. Roman numeral 3 would say that maximum road length in towns cannot be limited so as to impede development as long as a roadway or a proposed roadway or extension complies with state fire code. State fire code has a number of access requirements. It's chapter 18. Essentially, the road has to be 20 feet curb to curb. It must allow 13 feet of egress and must allow space to turn around. And as long as a roadway achieves those goals, a city or town could not limit the number of feet the road would be. Roman numeral 5 would allow developers to place utilities such as septic, drainage, other utilities into open spaces or perimeter buffers as long as the wetlands provisions are observed. Roman numeral 6, cities, towns, municipalities shall accept changes to plans as they are submitted after a review. So this in other words says that towns get one bite at the apple. what we heard from developers and builders over and over again was that they bring plans in, the planning board says, well, make these changes. Okay, they go out, they make the changes, they come back a month later. That's great, thank you. Now make these changes. And the application gets bounced back and forth between the planning board and the developer. And that's, in my opinion, acting in bad faith on the part of some of these planning boards. But B, understand that, again, every delay, every day, every hearing, that's more money on the backs of the developer, and that money is passed on to the end consumer. We can't bring down the cost of housing if we don't act to bring down the cost of doing business for the builders. Line 4 and 5 on page 2. Looks like that's been added twice, so I would suggest striking that via committee amendment. Line 6 through 9 essentially says that sightings of rare birds and animals would be relevant and considered within 5 years of the sighting. We heard from a builder who said that a sighting of a rare snake decades ago held up his project. We all care about rare endangered species, but holding up a project a decade or two after the last sighting just doesn't seem to be relevant. So this implies this would put in place a 5-year restriction. And the last section here, section 3, would essentially say towns could not adopt setback requirements more than 50 feet on the sides, front, or road frontage requirements of more than 50 feet. This is one of the tools that towns can use or have used in the past to require larger than necessary lots without having a strict lot minimum requirement. There's one town in the state that has such wide setbacks that you can't build on it if you have less than 8.2 acres. And so this seeks to address that loophole that could be used. So I hope that the committee will look kindly upon the amendment. Again, this all seeks to address the housing crisis that we find ourselves in. It is all severable, so if the committee does not like some part of this, simply draw a line through it, but I hope you'll pass it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I thought I heard discussion about maybe reconsidering 173 in that, but we'll deal with that later. So thank you. Any questions for Senator Murphy? Yes, Senator Finn.
Senator Murphy, thank you, and thank you for taking my question. Just a concern on the effective date is this July. That may be a little soon for the municipalities. Would you be willing to maybe push that back a little bit so they can kind of digest and adjust to this?
I would agree to a 2026.
Okay.
I think it's a good point, Senator. Thank you.
All right, January 1st, 2026. Okay, anything further? Senator Reardon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Murphy, in the first couple of lines on the top of page 2, I think we need some time in there. It says cities, towns shall stamp and accept changes to plans after the initial review. So when the developer comes back with the changes that the town has requested, that's a plan that's already been reviewed. Would you be amenable to putting within 3 days into that section?
Senator, I think it's very reasonable. I would support that.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything further? Thank you, Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Brady Deshay, please join us. We know where this is going, Senator. Good morning, Brady.
Good morning. First, just a point of clarification. Are we here for the public hearing on Amendment 0807S that was publicly posted 4 days in advance in accordance with the rules?
0872S?
The one, I didn't see a public posting for that 4 days in advance as a non-germane amendment, so I guess I'm just confused. So we're talking about the one that was on the back table there this morning?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
A lot of my testimony has to do with the originally public posted amendment, but I will,
Okay.
I've tried to review the other amendment that wasn't publicly posted,
All
and
right.
we'll address that to the best of my ability. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Deshay.
First, I want to point out, and so I'm going to go section by section with some of the technical issues, and then I'll have a general statement at the end.
Okay.
First, section 1, New Hampshire DS soil charts don't account always for slope as much as the Society for Soil Scientists of Northern New England, and this is in relation to test pitting requirements, and it's also related to section 2, which has to do with well siting. Municipalities may hire a soil scientist or review New Hampshire DS charts and the charts from other organizations such as the Soil Scientists of Northern New England and realize that the soil type in a zoning district or throughout a municipality needs more stringent requirements. These stringent requirements are especially important that the test pitting for a septic system accurately reflect the soil's ability and capacity to host a septic system and how wastewater will percolate. This is also especially true for well siting and ensuring that the water being drawn doesn't get contaminated by septic systems or pollution from another source. Section 3, as a general planning principle, any dead-end road necessarily creates problems of ingress and egress. If something blocks the only entrance to the road, there may be no way for residents or emergency vehicles to get in and out. Obviously, this is extremely problematic if you have an emergency. Prohibiting municipalities from restricting dead-end road lengths or cul-de-sacs to less than 2,500 feet could lead to long dead-end roads and cul-de-sacs which are not connected to each other and encourage additional curb cuts off main roads, which is not necessarily good planning in municipalities. Many municipalities have adopted access management requirements in their site plan or subdivision regulations or zoning ordinances, which encourage connectivity among roads and ensuring that promotes not just good ways for people to travel through their neighborhoods, it also promotes ways for emergency vehicles to get into a neighborhood by more than one route. It is unclear from the language how these access management or connectivity requirements would be affected because it doesn't actually really cite the statutes related to those. Dead-end roads, especially private developments, likely won't have the infrastructure for fire emergencies, and their fire hoses won't be long enough in municipalities to hook up a fire truck to a fire hydrant on the main road or a fire pond. Line 18 of the bill also doesn't currently state whether, quote, turning radius of the emergency medical fire rescue vehicles, end quote, is meant to include fire department's ladder truck. I also want, just as a frame of reference, 2,500 feet is almost half a mile, so quite a way. It's also important that the municipalities require that cul-de-sac or dead-end roads be able to be adequately accommodate all emergency services in their vehicles. So Section 4, prohibiting municipalities from capping the number of housing lots on a dead-end road or street could open the door to unlimited number of new housing units without adequate consideration of local infrastructure capacity, and it would maybe promote, quote, scattered or premature development, end quote. Capping the number of lots at the end of a dead-end road prevents overcrowding, especially when emergency equipment is needed to put out a fire or deal with an emergency. Lines 19 and 20 seem to also conflict with RSA 674:36 Roman 2, which states, quote, the subdivision regulations which the planning board adopts may A, provide against such scattered or premature subdivision of land as would involve danger or injury to health, safety, or prosperity by the reason of lack of water supply, drainage, transportation, schools, fire protection, or other public services, or necessitate the excessive expenditure of public funds for the supply of such services. Move on to Section 5. Allowing for the permitting of utilities, including septic systems, wells, electric systems, drainage structures, and other utilities in open space or perimeter buffers of subdivisions would encourage poor planning and could conflict with development restrictions and many conservation easements. It also runs counter to the conservation/open space subdivision/cluster developments, a planning tool used by 170 plus municipalities in the state as authorized by RSA 674:21, which promotes good development and increase of housing supply. Section 6 is not clear what the existing law this section is trying to amend or what issue with the current municipal planning and permitting process this sentence is trying to fix. RSA 674:37 and RSA 478:1-A already set minimum requirements for recording of plats and plans at the Registry of Deeds after planning board approval, including that the plans have been prepared and certified by a licensed land surveyor. So those things we believe are already well addressed and adequately addressed in existing state statutes. Section 7, many zoning ordinances limit how many unrelated individuals can live in a single dwelling unit. So I think the language intends to prevent zoning ordinances that have these regulations. This would be a congregate housing mandate, so mandating basically dormitory living in every residential zone throughout the state. And there have been other bills to this effect, such as House Bill 457 and House Bill 432. House Bill 432 was actually recently recommended as inexpedient to legislate by the House Municipal and County Government Committee, actually yesterday. Municipalities have an interest in regulating congregate housing differently than residential dwelling units or dwellings. The compelling reasons are related to safety, health, and general welfare. Congregate housing is a change of use, and if the use isn't permitted in the zoning district, the property owner needs to get a variance. Unrelated people living together behave much differently and than what a typical family unit would, how they may behave. And this is especially true with leases by bedroom, which is done in many college towns. For example, Keene, Durham, Plymouth, Hanover. The state Supreme Court has upheld this reasoning, specifically regarding the town of Durham zoning ordinances regarding occupancy requirements for unrelated people in residential dwelling units and allowing reasonable regulations on congregate living. So no outright bans, but just recognizing that at a certain threshold, that there is a compelling government interest to regulate that. And when congregate living is used in commercial and meets the zoning district's definition as such, it may require site plan review if the voters have approved an ordinance in their municipality to that effect. Also, the threshold for congregate living zoning ordinances typically aligns with the state fire code. So it's not an arbitrary number. It's typically at about 4. Once you have 5 unrelated people, there are certain things that you're required to put into that dwelling to meet the state fire code. Regulating congregate housing is not discrimination. It's about property and dwellings use, not who are using the property or the dwelling or how they're trying to change the use. So placing this language in RSA 354-8:8 implies that a non-discriminatory zoning ordinance would be discriminatory. It's strictly for health and safety of any individual. It doesn't matter their race, class, creed, age, etc. I also want to point out multifamily is not congregate living. A multifamily, you have a 16-unit multifamily building. Those each unit has its own amenities that's required to have a dwelling unit. Congregate living is people living in their own bedrooms or even sharing bedrooms and sharing common living spaces such as a kitchen, bathrooms, living space, and even parking. Additionally, any municipality can permit congregate zoning in any zoning district, and many, as I mentioned, that are denser, they do. They do allow it, or they're pretty understanding, especially in college towns, by allowing a variance through the zoning process. Also, we're a little bit confused as to how the Human Rights Commission is involved, as cited in at least the amendment that wasn't publicly posted for today that's on the back table. Specifically because the Human Rights Commission doesn't oversee land use on the local level, and there's also no citation to the exact statutes and what their statutory powers are. As to the new section that would create a new RSA 674:23-B, it's not clear what issue this section of the amendment is trying to fix, as typically most developments would be under construction or completed, quote, more than 5 years after the date of the development application. I believe that was from the original amendment, though I think now that language has changed, but we do have some concerns about that and how planning departments will be able to implement that with the state. Typically, completion of the New Hampshire Fish and Game's review of endangered species habitat under RSA 212-A and the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources review of protected plant habitat under RSA 217-A is necessary prior to a property owner obtaining a building permit and putting a shovel in the ground. There's also another new paragraph that would, under RSA 674:17, identical to Senate Bill 231 relative to the road frontage requirements and setbacks for wetlands. As some frame of reference, again, this bill was retained by the Senate Executive Department and Administration Committee, I believe, last week. So this language focuses on restricting the amount of road frontage that can be required and controlling setbacks for wetlands and lot lines to increase density. It also says that these requirements, frontage, wetland, and lot line dimensions, cannot exceed 50 feet. It's a very broad zoning mandate, erasing many, if not all, existing dimensional requirements and limiting lot line setbacks, wetland setbacks, frontage requirements to no more than 50 feet. This would require municipalities to limit frontage and setbacks to increase more density in zoning districts where this may not be feasible. We also believe this language conflicts with RSA 483-B:3, Roman 2, quote, when the standards and practices established in this chapter conflict with other local or state laws and rules, the more stringent standards shall control, end quote. The section also likely conflicts with RSA 483-B:8, 2, which encourages and permits municipalities to adopt local regulations to promote shoreland protections. Additionally, this language, we believe, would mandate hammerhead lots or keyhole lots, permitting lots with long rights of ways that are non-conforming with current zoning requirements and frontage requirements in order to decrease housing density, which could create issues for ingress and egress for emergency vehicles and safety equipment like a fire truck, down a narrow driveway during an emergency. It also doesn't consider driveways, paved or not, are considered impervious surfaces and would have harmful runoff that would negatively impact wetlands or neighboring properties. Almost always where acreage requirements are larger than 4 acres, it tends to be in a zone that permits agricultural uses. The road frontage requirements would likely impact municipality zoning. And I just want to say in summary, this bill would mandate unworkable planning and development requirements on towns and cities. And these big government mandates would undermine local control and the will of the voters in every municipality throughout the Granite State that have voted to adopt these zoning ordinances for safe, responsible development. And we kindly ask that you vote the bill inexpedient to legislate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deshaies. Senator Murphy.
Just have one question.
Yes.
On the section 3, line 25 and 26 of the correct amendment. I've got a constituent who owns 40 acres. It's the end of a 1,200-foot road, the maximum allowed in this community. He wants to extend the road, do a loop, and make, I think, 18 buildable lots, building 18 houses. The town is telling him he can build 1 house because that road can't be lengthened. Do you think it's reasonable to tell somebody with 40 acres they can build 1 house?
I think that's a great question, and I think it depends on the circumstances and the zoning ordinances that exist. I would imagine in many municipalities that with their subdivision requirements, you could build more developments as long as you made sure it wasn't at the end of a dead end. So you might create another road to another main road so you have multiple access points. There is a compelling interest, not just for taxpayers, but for the municipality to prevent premature and scattered development, and putting 18 dwelling units at the end of a, how long was the road that you mentioned? You said 12,000 square?
1,200.
1,200. I think there is an interest when it comes to trying to get emergency vehicles into a development, especially if you have 18 homes in that development, ensuring that everyone can get the adequate emergency services and fire services that they need. So, I don't know that specific case, but there are cases all over the state where, yes, there's a compelling interest. And oftentimes, too, when these private developments are created later on, these property owners end up trying to get their roads to become public, which is a further burden onto the municipality and the property taxpayers having to take over those private services and turn them into public services. And so that's part of the interest. That's why municipalities don't want premature and scattered development, to make sure that these dwelling units are near public roads and near public services, and that there's consent from the taxpayers that, yes, we're going to cover those public services for those other residents.
Follow up.
The section dealing with mandates that occupants of housing units be related by blood or marriage. So Plymouth doesn't allow people more than 3 unrelated occupants in the same dwelling unit. So when I was in my 20s and I shared a house with 3 of my friends, that wouldn't be allowed in Plymouth or some other communities around the state that have adopted this ordinance. Do you really think that that's non-discriminatory?
It depends on, so first, let me first address the whole situation in and of itself. So it depends on the zoning district, likely where that zoning district likely is where there's dormitory living. So it's making sure that 2 people who might live in, sharing a bedroom, that there's only 2 people to that bedroom to prevent any issues with the fire code or having too many people packed into the same dwelling unit. It really does depend on the situation and the infrastructure and whether or not they have the adequate development to support higher density or densities to the level where you might have like trying to fit 8 people into the same dwelling unit. That's dangerous, and that can have issues with the fire code. And again, this all kind of ties back to these zoning ordinances. Oftentimes, especially in denser areas with young people who are living in dormitories, they want to make sure that the developers or the owners of those buildings are meeting the fire code. And so these zoning ordinances help promote that health and safety to these students. I would say land use in that regards is not discriminatory. It's the same expectation for anyone who wants to live in that zoning district. There are places in this state where the whole committee, if they decide they want to live in the same dwelling unit, could very easily live together in that dwelling unit if you all wanted to co-sign on a lease and live together. I wouldn't imagine that would happen, but it could, and that's permitted. So, and if it wasn't, then you could go get a variance and the committee could live in that dwelling unit together. And most municipalities are understanding considering the current housing issues that we're dealing with. And especially if It's not going to change the looks of the structure if there's adequate parking for all of you to live in that dwelling unit. And in addition to the infrastructures and the wastewater disposal capacity meets the expectations of DES and the municipality. So I think it really does depend, and college towns especially have an interest in making sure there isn't overcrowding in private or public dormitories.
Are there further questions? All right, seeing none, thank you, Mr. Deshaies.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
A 1-minute recess. So I can- All right, thank you for indulging me. We are out of recess, and I would like to ask Mr. Mike Marchand to please come forward. Good morning, Mr. Marchand. Microphone, please. Yes, thank you.
There you go. New to this.
And if you could state your name, where you're from?
Yep. Mike Marchand. I'm the supervisor of the non-game and endangered wildlife program at the New Hampshire Fish and Game.
Okay.
Yes, so my testimony will be very brief today. Our department did not testify on the original language of Senate Bill 170. We just recently learned about the amendment language pertaining to wildlife resources and the state review process. So came here to learn more about that process, learn more even in today's introduction. We have some concerns about the language and how it affects the state review process and overlapping statutes that already address how the review process occurs. It's certainly never the department's intent to delay or block development associated with wildlife resources. We do our best to work with applicants to find a solution on projects to move forward that both provides protection for species as well as allows projects to move forward. But we feel that there's ongoing discussions right now, even in the legislature right now, in terms of changes and bill language that would change that process and improve from a streamlined review process. And we think it's better to kind of use that, consolidate, and keep everything within one process. I will say I learned a little bit more about the intent. I will say that limiting reviews to 5-year period would substantially reduce our protections for species. Our resources are very limited and do not allow us to repeat visitation of sites within that regularity. That would be extreme and would basically eliminate the vast majority of our occurrences that we do reviews for. So we recommend removing the proposed amendment specifically to the wildlife reviews as part of this. And that's all we have for today.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Senator Murphy.
How many years is reasonable? If 5 is not reasonable, what number of years would be reasonable? I saw a snake on this site 8 years ago. Should we stop the housing development now? I'm just curious. Thank you.
Yeah, so the national standard for what we consider a current record is 20 years, and that's because different species have different life history traits, meaning they live longer, and so that might be different for different species. So turtles, for instance, an individual turtle can live 80 years, and so we don't use 80 years. 20 years would be our standard, but if there was a record and the habitat hasn't changed substantially, we would consider what the potential for that species to still occur, and then provide conservation recommendations as part of that review in order to assist that. If the landscape has changed and it's clear that that species no longer persists or doesn't have the potential to persist in that landscape, then that would have ramifications to our review, and then we wouldn't provide those same conservation record. And once we know a species, if we know a species is extirpated due to an activity, then we would call that record essentially old, and it would no longer be used in a search for future projects.
Senator McHugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking my question. So we hear a lot about the eastern hognose snake and the Blanding's turtle. Those are a couple that have stopped developments from some of my constituents. The number in the statute is a 10-year look back. Senator Murphy asked what the number would be. I heard you say 20. So are you suggesting we raise it, or what is a reasonable number for a look back, considering the need for development in certain communities?
I'm not familiar with the 10-year look back reference. I'll have to go back and look at where that specific, where is that reference to?
That's the subject of this amendment. We're discussing now changing 10 to 5, as Senator Murphy referenced. He gave the example of a reported sighting of perhaps an eastern hognose snake, which is a rare species, that I have some direct reports of alteration of terrain permits being halted or issued, the issuance of same being halted because of a reported sighting of those. And the question is, how long of a look back? Reportedly, there was may or may not have been a sighting of this species 8 or 10 years ago, or you mentioned 20 years ago. Should that halt development? What's the number?
Yeah. I mean, there are certainly species that can go long, that we have records that are even longer than that we no longer use. Again, because of the survey frequency of those, I will say that those species like hognose snakes, the reason why that particular species is challenging is because they're very difficult to survey for. They're very cryptic. They're very hard to detect, even by professionals going out to the site. And so limiting that to a 5-year period, even for professionals going out on surveys, would really limit the ability to provide conservation measures for those given projects. And in fact, for hognose snakes in particular, we often don't recommend surveys specifically for that species as part of a project, just because it would take multiple years to survey for that species just to detect the species. So we generally try to provide conservation measures for that particular species that are consistent with trying to help, avoid and minimize impacts to them as part of a project site.
Senator Fenton.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my question. So just to clarify, your issues are with page 2, lines 6 through 9.
Correct.
And if, follow up, Mr. Chair?
Yes, of course.
Let's say we strike that out, you'd have no issues with the rest of this language?
The Fish and Game Department doesn't have any comments for the rest of the Senate Bill 170, correct?
Thank you.
Okay. Anything further? Thank you, Ms. Marchand. Appreciate it. All right, next up, we have Meredith Hatfield from a group that I belong to, the Nature Conservancy. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Meredith Hatfield for the Nature Conservancy. I do have to also apologize. I just did get a copy of 0872S because 0807S was posted, but I will try to comment on what's actually before you. Our main concerns are with the section that Fish and Game just spoke to, and we agree with them. And once a species is gone, it's gone. And we believe that Fish and Game does work with developers to try to, as they said, propose conservation approaches that can be taken in order to allow appropriate development to go forward. So we would also support striking that section. We do recognize that there is a housing crisis in New Hampshire, and we thank Senator Murphy and colleagues for bringing forward so many potential ways to address it. But we also believe that we need to ensure that we are protecting our water resources and other important aspects that make New Hampshire a great place to live. The other section that I wanted to raise concerns with starts on line 10 on page 2. I believe a prior speaker mentioned that this is very similar language to what appeared in Senate Bill 231, which the Energy and Environment Committee just voted unanimously to re-refer. I believe that's on the consent calendar. There was a lot of testimony, including from the New Hampshire Association of Conservation Commissions, about how this could impact municipalities. But perhaps the most compelling testimony to that committee was about the impact on agricultural zones in towns and how this could really have potentially a negative impact on agricultural uses, agricultural zones, and the ability for people to continue with agricultural activities. And that's certainly a concern for us. So we would request that those last two sections of the bill either be struck or that very last section that I just spoke to probably needs more consideration due to the impact on certain zones like agricultural and also issues related to wetlands. If we're going to be encroaching on wetlands, that has a host of issues, including for new homeowners. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, thank you. Appreciate your testimony. Matt Mayberry, representing the home builders. Good morning again.
Good morning again.
Mike. Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Once again, I'm Matt Mayberry. I'm the CEO of the New Hampshire Home Builders Association, representing the 27,000 men and women in the residential building trades. I'm here today in strong support of SB 170. This bill is a true game changer, cutting through red tape while maintaining public health and safety. It shines a bright light on the excessive micromanagement of housing developments in New Hampshire. If passed, SB 170 would prevent towns from imposing stricter septic and well regulations than New Hampshire DES, while allowing for smart placement options for wells and septics in open spaces and buffer zones. It would remove arbitrary limits on dead-end road lengths, as long as emergency vehicle access is sufficient. It was referenced in another testimony about line 26, which clearly states extension thereof complies with the state fire code. That it is addressed in this bill. It would eliminate the caps on the number of house lots allowed on dead-end roads. It would stop towns from dictating that residents of a domicile must be related by blood or marriage, an outdated and unnecessary restriction. The Human Rights Commission was referenced earlier about discrimination. I was chair of the Human Rights Commission for 2 years. I've seen this, I've done it, and one could say that you talk about familial status. One story that I do want to share with the senators is that if I and my partner, a same-sex partner, were living together in Durham, I am the executor of my best friend's will, and I'm the caretaker of his 3 children. If they were to pass in a car accident, husband and wife, and me and my partner were to take care of those 3 kids, we could not live in Durham because it's more than 3 unrelated people under the same roof. That is discrimination based upon familial status. Let's call it exactly what it is. When we get into it will require all recommendations from a town initial scoping and technical review committee be final, preventing costly delays and by ever-changing demands. We absolutely support the committee amendment for within 3 days because builders of mine have told me again and again and again, if a planning board or zoning board doesn't want a development to go through, they will kick that can down the road. And don't forget, right around November or so, we get the whole, well, Ruth Ann goes to Florida for the winter. So if you can't get in before November 1st, we'll see you in the springtime. It happens. When they don't want it, they will find ways to delay this again and again. Opponents have claimed that this bill will destroy towns. Wow. Just a reminder to the senators, we haven't had major rezoning legislation in 30 years. How much more time do we need to talk about how we look at zoning? How much more time do we need to talk about planning? We've had 30 years. If not now, then when? Let's have the tough conversations. This is a tough subject. The New Hampshire Home Builders, we placed SB 170 on one of our top priorities. It wasn't on our radar screen in the original format. In this new replace all, this makes a difference. This shines a bright, shining light on those long-kept backroom deals that are struck. They're arbitrary. They don't make a whole lot of sense. And also, let's let homeowners determine what they want to do. If they want to have a 1,700-foot private road, it's their land. Who are others to say, nope, 1,200? I would love to see the science behind why a 1,200-foot road is the number. Why not 1,100? Why not 1,300? How did 1,200 get around? Take a guess. Let's go here. So I know this bill is up for conversation. I know some of you senators, and bless you. I'm an ordained minister, so really bless you. I know some senators don't like parts of this, and that's fine, but please keep the majority of this through. It will make a difference. It gets rid of the backroom deals, and it gets rid of the old boy network. Let's put this in the bright, shining light of day. Please.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayberry. Other questions for Mr. Mayberry? Seeing none, we appreciate your testimony. I would note there was one person who signed in favor from the Association of General Contractors of New Hampshire. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to the bill who maybe didn't sign up? All right, seeing none, I will close the hearing on Senate Bill 170. Do I have a motion to go into executive session? All right, all in favor of executive session, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, what say we start with 170? And let's get this wrapped up so we can get back to the rest.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I would move all to pass on 170 and ask for a second so we can discuss the amendment.
I will second it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to move amendment 0872S with the following alterations.
All right.
The effective date changed to July 1, 2026.
Oh, July 1. All right.
Roman numeral 7 on line 4 and 5 on page 2 is deleted because it's redundant.
Roman numeral 7. Got it.
And
Okay.
that the suggestion by Senator Reardon on the 3 days language would be inserted at her direction.
Okay.
So we'd have to ask her to clarify where exactly she wanted that. And if I may, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say that I'm certainly open to other suggestions, amendments, deletions.
Okay.
This is a list of, in my opinion, good ideas.
Mhm.
But if there's not going to be widespread agreement or adoption by the committee as a whole, I'm open to taking out one line or 2 lines. I would ask the committee to support the majority of it, but any of these ideas is worth passing by itself.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Murphy. Further discussion. Senator McGue.
I truly don't know what the number is for the proper amount of look back because I'm not a biologist. I've had constituents experience problems with these particular species. I have no idea how long an eastern hognose snake hibernates, so could be there, may not be there. I was hoping we'd get some input from the experts if somebody else knows or wants to give some input. But if it's currently 10, is 5 the right number? Is 20 the right number? I don't know, but I do know that I have had specific constituents and admittedly had not heard of the eastern hognose snake until it came up in that context.
Understood. Yeah, it certainly varies. I mean, if you coming from the Midwest, if you're trying to protect cicadas, it's a 17-year look back. Right? So, just kidding around there, but I understand and appreciate where you're coming from.
I think we're all very proud of the bald eagles return to New Hampshire, and we are very proud of the conservation work our departments do. And whoever said it, when a species is gone, it's gone, and we don't,
Yeah.
and there's no turning back from that. So it's a balance, but I don't know what the number is.
And yeah, and I would say, just, I tend to agree with that. I mean, our farm's in conservation, so all keen on this, but yeah, I mean, we do have to find that right balance, and that is hard to do. All right, Senator.
I will add one more thing, though. I mean,
Yes.
there are measures. I neglected to share the outcome with that particular permitting process. The outcome was, it was alluded to by somebody who testified. There were mitigations. They put up a fence to keep the snake or turtle, and I don't remember which it was, out of that area. And that prevented the destruction of the habitat for that particular improvement to the property. So there was a way to fix it beyond just halting the development. So there are other means that I also learned about during that process.
All right, thank you, Senator McHugh. Senator Fenton?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we can get to a yes on this. I do have some concerns, what we heard about, the rare species. I propose striking lines 6 through 9 on page 2. Just completely deleting that section. And then line 12 on page 2, deleting setbacks for wetlands. I think there's some concerns there, and I don't want to mess with the wetlands. If we are willing to entertain those, I think we could get to a yes on this.
Senator Murphy?
Politics is the art of the possible. And if making those changes is going to gain the support of my friend from Keene, I would make those changes. I would agree to those changes.
Okay. Further discussion on those suggested changes? All
So
right,
we're deleting wetlands from line 12.
Yes,
So setbacks
yes.
for lot lines would be the new reading.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Senator
I
Sharp.
could support the bill with those changes, having been on Conservation Commission for many years.
Very good. All right. Do you have all of that?
I just want
Yes.
So on page 2, line 4 and 5. And then on page 2, line 6 through 9.
Mm-hmm.
Then on line 12, we're just deleting setbacks.
Correct. Changing the effective date to July 1, 2026?
Correct. And then there's a 3-day period.
Yes.
If I could clarify, on line 12, we still want lot line setbacks to be included. We just want to
Yes.
take the word for wetlands.
For wetlands, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So it would be setbacks for lot lines, right?
Correct. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yes.
No, yeah.
We'll get the
Yeah.
effective date.
Yeah.
Did you need clarification on the 3 days?
On the 3 days.
So they need to stamp the plan within 3 days of that presentation. I think I would leave it to OLS to find the right place to put that in there, if the intent is clear.
Persistent sending signs. He's like the catcher. Yeah, he's the catcher. All right. Are we clear on all of that? All right. Do we have a motion on the amendment?
So we ought to pass on that amendment.
And we have a second from Senator Fenton. All in favor of the amendment, the committee amendment, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. And we have an on-to-pass motion on the bill itself. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of Senate Bill 170, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? All right.
Move consent.
I'll second consent. All in favor of consent? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Senator Murphy, would you take this out?
Yes, sure.
All right. Excellent. All right, let's go back and pick up where we left off. Thought we'd make it by noon. I don't know. Maybe. Let's see. We just might. Senate Bill. Make sure I've got this right. 281. Is that right, Aaron? Yes, we do need to do that. We'll do that last. And Senator Murphy, don't let me forget 173. We'll do that at the end.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
on Senate Bill 281, I would move ought to pass and ask
Okay.
for a second for the amendment.
All right. Do we have a second on ought to pass on 281?
Second.
We have a second from Senator Reardon. All right, discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I move amendment 0829S
All right. 0829S, got it.
This amendment came about as a result of a discussion in the Housing Subcommittee. Senator Reardon made the excellent point that there might be an issue having a house built on a Class 6 road being insurable. So this amendment adds lines 14 and 15. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, proves the lot and any buildings thereon are insurable.
Okay.
So it seeks to address that concern.
All right, thank you. Discussion. Senator Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did just see there was some issues with the effective date. I was wondering if the prime sponsor would be willing to keep the effective date instead of 60 days, I think. Maybe give it a year, like July 1st, 2026.
Senator Fenton, I would agree to that amendment.
All right, very good. Okay, any further discussion? All right, do we have a motion on the amendment? I'll second it. All right, so we did amend the amendment, so it's now considered a committee amendment. All in favor of the committee amendment, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, all in favor of Senate Bill 281, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Wonderful. I will move consent. And we have a second from Senator Reardon. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Very good. 282, yeah, Senator Murphy, would you do the honor?
I expect to be very busy, Senator.
Yes, you will. We love hearing from you. All right. 282, you are the housing guru, Senator Murphy.
Thank you,
Senator
Mr. Chairman.
Perkins spoke up. I'm second team at this point.
Mr. Chairman, I would move up to pass on 282 and ask for a second for an amendment.
Okay. We have a motion of ought to pass on 282. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Senator Reardon. All right, Senator Murphy, you have an amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I move Amendment 0528S.
Okay.
This amendment was drafted at the request and recommendation of the State Fire Marshal to address his concerns. It limits the building area to no more than 4,000 per floor. Again, it's limited to buildings with sprinkler systems, which are essentially as close to fireproof as you can get without making the building out of concrete. Limits the electrical receptacles in hallways, etc. So I ask for your support for the amendment in the underlying bill.
Okay, very good. So you've moved the amendment. Do we have a second on the amendment?
Second.
A second from Senator Reardon. Discussion on the amendment. Seeing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And all in favor of Senate Bill 282, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, I'll move consent.
Second.
We have a second from Senator Fenton. All in favor of consent, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Very good. Brings us to 283. Oh, gosh, I forget. Senator Murphy, we'll give you a break. Would anyone like to take this one out? Senator Reardon has it. Thank you, Aaron. 283, calculation of floor area ratios under local building ordinances. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move out to pass.
We have a motion about to pass. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Senator Reardon. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman, this bill, just to lay it out there, to simply standardizes the calculation of floor area ratios in those few jurisdictions across the state that have adopted that particular ordinance. Any town or city may still adopt the ordinance. It simply says they have to calculate it the same way.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor of Senate Bill 283, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? I'm going to move consent. And we have a second from Senator Fenton. All in favor of consent, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Very good. Anyone want to take this one out? I'll do it.
Sure.
Oh, Senator McHugh, you can have it. All right. Senate Bill 284 is next, and it's the last,
Until we
except for one other thing. It's almost the last. Senate Bill 284, do we have a motion?
I'll move out to pass.
We have an ought to pass from Senator Murphy. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Senator Reardon. Discussion.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Senator Sharp.
I'm opposed to this bill. My constituents, it's a mandate. It downshifts costs, period, to the taxpayers. We can't take this one-size-fits-all approach. And for that and many other reasons, I don't support this. It's going to create potential planning and safety issues including those regarding traffic, management, and community, aesthetics, health, safety, snow removal. It's also in conflict with RSA 674-16, which has just recently come into law, July 1st of 2024. Most of the dwelling units in New Hampshire require 1 to 2 parking spaces, and the state mandated maximum parking requirement of 1.5 per dwelling unit is reasonable because it's an average of 1 to 2. I just, for the record, I'm going to oppose it and do what my constituents want.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Any further discussion? Senator Murphy.
Thank you. With respect to my friend from Bedford, cars are not as necessary now for all of our citizens as they were. I believe that the vast majority of developers and builders, especially in suburban areas outside of center cities, will continue to provide parking because the real reason to do it is because that's what customers want. That's what their customers want. You don't need to mandate people to do what their customers want. They are motivated to do it because they want to sell a product. And communities outside of urban centers will continue, developers outside of urban centers will continue to provide parking spaces to meet the demand of their customers. So I put my trust in developers, and because I'm in business, I understand that's what we do. We meet our customers' requests, and developers are no different. They will do that without being forced to. And in those areas that doesn't make sense, in denser areas, then they wouldn't.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Murphy. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, we have a motion of ought to pass. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Me.
Okay, we have one opposed. I will,
I was
yes.
going to ask if the Senator would object to consent.
Yeah, I do not want to put it on consent. I'd like
Okay.
to speak to it.
Very good. Who would like to take this out?
I will.
Senator Murphy. All right, very good. All right, now, Senator Murphy, listening to your testimony earlier,
Thank you.
as you introduced the bill, you have a motion for us.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move we reconsider our action on Senate Bill 173.
Okay, I will second that. Do you want to speak to that for a second?
I will.
Okay.
Sharon, and by we, I really mean myself. I made a mistake. Senate Bill 173 and Senate Bill 175 are fairly close in title, and I looked at the wrong bill. And I apologize to the committee. Senate Bill 173 standardizes a method of calculating the housing tax credit across the state. There's currently 2 methods. This was a bill that the Housing Subcommittee supported unanimously. We intended to pass it or recommend its passage. And so I ask that we reconsider the refer motion so we can move on to pass.
Okay. We have a motion to reconsider. We have a second. All in favor of reconsideration, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, very good.
Move on to pass.
And I will second the ought to pass motion. Any discussion? All in favor of ought to pass, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, I will move consent.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Anyone want to take this out? I'll do it. All right. Is there anything further? I'm looking at Aaron and the committee. All right.
We leave executive session.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of leaving exec, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? I'll make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a second from, I'll give it to Senator Ricciardi. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Awesome. Thank you, gentle people. We'll see you in a couple, 3 weeks. Yeah, we are. We got this one done early.